All right. Welcome everyone to the next Malware Mondays live stream. Hopefully, I got this one started a little bit closer to on time. Still, for some reason, these live streams make me just a little anxious that I'm forgetting something. Got chat open, so if there are anyone here, let me know if you can hear or see, or if you're running into issues with audio or visual. I'm going to be very much in the desktop today using my Flare VM, so that'll be the majority of the episode here, and you'll see my face shrink to a little box in the corner. Let's see, a couple of announcements here before we get too far into our topic today. And by the way, our topic today is going to be sandbox analysis. And the reason that I wanted to bring up sandbox analysis, as maybe you'll see, if you look back at the different topics that we've covered so far in the Malware Monday series, it's all about basic analysis. And I jumped into the series using tools that you can leverage manually in your own analysis environments. But I got to thinking, well, sandboxes play a pretty important role, and whether I'm using an online sandbox or I'm using a public sandbox, we'll use public ones today. Well, online public kind of, I guess, being the same thing, or an internal sandbox, maybe one available through work. They're usually a very important first step. And part of that, that potential easy button that I look for answers before I start even really digging into any of the samples themselves. So that's the reason, and that's what we're going to be covering today. Let me move into share my screen mode. There we go. All right, hopefully everyone can see that okay. I wonder if I can move my... There we go. I like that a little bit better. So I'm going to overlay myself, get a little more desktop space. Couple of just channel announcements. Just got back from Defcon, was able to provide a couple of workshops with some colleagues, both from my day job and folks that I've worked with over the years. One of those was a workshop in Yara with a colleague from VirusTotal. I think the workshop went really well. Hopefully anyone that was in the workshop can chime in here in the comments. The workshop was actually inspired by a larger course that we're offering at Suricon this November in Madrid, Spain. So if you want to check that out, you can go to suricon.net and take a look at the trainings. You'll see a little tab up here at the top, trainings, and we're going to be the top one here. So the goal with this is to cover probably not equally in 3 parts. We'll spend a fair bit of time with IDS rules and Suricata. We'll spend a good deal of time with Yara and all of the many uses that you can find with Yara and creating Yara signatures. And then we'll spend some time in Sigma. The next big announcement is going to be with the channel itself. So a couple of things here. First, I have some upcoming live streams, and you're going to see actually with some of these live streams a transition into a little bit of the format, not only continuing with the Malware Monday series, but then getting into more kind of guest driven. So Karsten Hahn is going to join. He is a very well-known malware analyst, reverse engineer. He's been providing all sorts of great content and tools and blog posts and everything for many years. That's going to be on the 5th of September. If you're in the North American time zones, maybe a little late, 10 p.m. European time zones, a little early. So just beware of the scheduling. Of course, it'll be recorded, so you can always catch the recording there. And then another stream coming up with Peter Mann of Stamus Networks, author of the Selks Linux distribution, longtime member of the Suricata community. So we're going to talk about threat hunting, network monitoring, and I'm sure some other topics that'll come up. So that's what we've going on here for future live streams. The other big announcement then, probably maybe the one I should have led with, is I have memberships. I'm trying that out. Just launched this week. So if you're interested in sort of taking the next step here, let's see, how do I mute this? Imagine the audio is not coming through to you, but I can't hear myself talk while I'm talking. Got a little intro video here if you want to check out a bit more about why and the rationale and some of the tiers. Have that video recorded and available. Be a number of different perks based off of the level. Have some loyalty badges, working on getting some custom emojis here as well. This will be, of course, for the YouTube channel. So just launched those this week. In fact, I've got the first member, John, if you're on, just a quick shout out. Thank you. You're number one in many ways, and your support is very much appreciated. Overall, my goal here is to create an ecosystem as a content creator that's self-sustainable so that I can continue to grow the time I'm spending on and the amount of material then that I'm putting out there for ultimately for all of you to hopefully benefit from. So that is absolutely the goal there. Okay, let's get into today's topics here. So again, in the Flare VM, using the Flare VM today, I'm actually going to have a couple of different systems that I'm going to be bouncing around in. So I'll explain those here as we go. Let's see. For the first, so there are two ways I wanted to approach this live stream. The first is to take the hash of a sample that we've been working with, and the kind of the motivation behind that is that we would have the same file that we're building familiarity with. And as we're doing that, you're seeing what different tools can and cannot do for you. So we're going to look at some of the platforms here with basic usage or with this sample hash. Now, the second thing we're going to do, and I wanted this to be a little bit more of a realistic approach. This is a lot of times how I use these platforms, that is these online sandboxes. Going to do a little bit of, I did a little bit of scraping just before the live stream. And by that, I mean, I have this tool that helps me to scour the internet after I feed it some URLs, and I can talk a little bit about where those URLs come from. And I look for things that are particularly open directories. And then from those open directories, this is a pretty good example right here. And we'll actually talk about this one in just a few minutes. Try to find something that is, some content of interest. Executable files are a good one. And then I've integrated this tool with platforms from Abuse.ch, the URL house, and the Malware bazaar. And they become particularly more interesting to me when I take the executable, I download it through my tool, I generate the hash, MB5 or SHA-2. I don't remember which one now. It doesn't really matter. But then I look on those platforms, and if neither platform has intelligence about or a record of that file, well, then that means it might be something new or unknown or some new variant or some new campaign, or there's something interesting about it. So we'll grab some of these and do some analysis to see what sandboxes tell us. The challenge with doing this live is that in fact, one of the servers we're going to look at has been changing this morning as I've been getting ready for the stream. So hopefully I've downloaded all those payloads. So if they're not live at the time we go to pull them, we'll just take them off disk here. But this tool, if you're interested, actually is called Subcrawl, and you can find that on my GitHub. I have a fork of it. Originally released this tool with when I was with HP. So you can check that out, though. I forked it and maybe have kept it a little bit more up to date just in terms of adding some features, some additional modules and other things, in particular, like that integration with the Abuse.ch. I don't think you're going to see that on the original branch. So if you want to check that out, it's available there on GitHub, and there's more videos and stuff too that get into all of the inner workings of it. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the stream today with that. Okay, so that's where some of the samples are going to come from. All right, I'm going to go ahead and copy the SHA-2. So this is our Amadey sample that we've been working on throughout the last few Malware Mondays. We'll use that as our kind of entry point into our first sandbox, which is Triage. Now, Triage has been acquired by Recorded Future. I believe it was a standalone company before that. And some of the folks that originally developed Cuckoo, the Cuckoo Sandbox, which was by far the most popular open source sandbox that you could grab and create your own sandbox internally in your own network. I ran my own Cuckoo for many years, and it was found to be very, very valuable and helpful. It has its own learning curves, of course, but anyways, some of those same folks, if you're interested in hosting your own sandbox, that's probably a topic for another day. I would look to Cape, C-A-P-E. That's going to be a more up-to-date, I think still very well-maintained fork of Cuckoo. So that'll be the route that you're going to want to go. Now, this is, of course, a commercial online sandbox. This is what I mean by online or public. We hit it through a browser. Anything that we want to search for, we're going to upload here then, of course, through our browser as well. Some caveats with these online platforms then is that I am just using the free tier. So pretty much everything that we're going to use today, and anything I'm going to probably use in these live streams, is going to be either free to use or have some sort of a free tier that you can leverage. So you can start using them, you can follow along, and so forth. Those oftentimes will have some sort of a caveat or restriction. For example, a free tier, typically that means that when you upload samples, they will be made publicly available by default. And so anything you upload, you have to be you have to be cognizant of that. Not only are you, okay with whatever you're uploading being publicly available, you also have to think about your own operational security. Where are you uploading it from? As well as if there is some sort of an adversary that is watching what is being uploaded to these public places. And if by you uploading it and them monitoring it, that can tip your hat, I guess, however you say that, that you're onto them. And that might mean that if they're actually already in your network, that they might change their tactics. They might go dormant. It might make some modification or some, elicit some change in how they're operating. So you just have to be careful here. Read the fine print when it comes to these free tiers. And I just assume that anytime I'm using a free tier, my information is going to be utilized and ultimately made, at least from the samples I'm uploading, publicly available. Now, I'm logged in because there are some things that we just need to be logged in to do. I don't always use accounts that can be traced back to me. So those, you can build some additional layers of kind of obfuscation into how you use these sources. How I access them also can vary. Some of the systems here that we're going to look at, why I'm using multiple systems today, is going to be because of, I don't always want to be accessing even research systems from my primary networks. So I'll route traffic through, of course, a VPN. Okay, so we can start to use this, and there's like two easy ways to get started with a sandbox such as this. One is just we go look at reports, and you'll see that since I'm logged in, we've got my samples, which are then the samples I've uploaded. I can see those, and we've got all public samples. And this is just sort of this running list of things that have been uploaded recently and that the uploader has marked to be public. So if your free tier is just going to be public, if you have a paid account, then you oftentimes will have the ability to mark this as private or public. Marking it private, meaning that the rest of the world can't see that. Maybe only people in your organization, for example. You could be a private account, a paid account as part of an organizational account, and only your your colleagues can then access it. This is actually kind of an interesting example here. I don't know if we'll have time to get into this particular report, but you'll see this stealer.exe that I uploaded last night, actually, because today is the 15th, or maybe it was this morning, but very recently, within the last 12 hours or so of doing the stream. It was on an open directory that I found, and I checked it just before the stream, and it was gone. Now, I'm not going to say that because it showed up on triage, that the adversary noticed it and took it down. It might have just been part of their staging and prepping and just changing out payloads. I don't know, but it's no longer there. And some of where that infrastructure that came from has been modified. Before that, it wasn't there. That's what made it an interesting sample for the stream. It wasn't there. It wasn't on VirusTotal. So I thought that would be a good one to look at. But I found some other ones here. We'll talk a little bit about VirusTotal as well, and sort of the importance of it wasn't on VirusTotal, that statement I just made, what that means to me. Now, if we just look at reports, right, I don't know if that's all that helpful. Sometimes I will just comb through reports. I tend to use AnyRun for that, and I'll show you how and why I do that in a moment. But more than likely, I'm going to, let's say I've come across a sample, and much like we have with our Amadey, and I just want to generate the hash, which I've already shared on the page, and search for that hash then on this platform. And you'll see that'll bring up, I guess kind of, again, two things. If it's been submitted before, now you'll see not only when it was submitted, how many times it was submitted, you get a little bit of a history here. And this can be helpful because this will help you kind of identify a little bit of maybe the first time it was seen in the wild. Maybe you can get a little bit of context as to the time frame. So you can see the sample we've been working with is now getting older and older, but it's all from this year. We have the original file name. Sometimes that can be helpful, especially if it's been some artifact that's part of a phishing. Maybe then the uploader retained that original name from some of that phishing documents, or if the naming mattered in the chain that it was delivered in. We have also these tags. These tags are kind of like the easy button for me, right? This is oftentimes what I'm looking for when I upload something or search something, because this tag here really hits the nail right on the head and says, hey, this is a Trojan. Okay, that's great. A little too generic, but it specifically says it's Amadey, right? And a lot of these platforms you'll have to get comfortable with, but a lot of times when they apply a tag such as this with a malware family, they're usually fairly confident in how they're identifying what that family is. That could be from static file such as Yara. That could be from memory dump via Yara. That could be some behavioral thing through something like a Sigma. It could also be through network traffic, something like Suricata. Just depends on how the sandbox, but typically sandboxes are using all of that technology to help with these sort of detections here. We get with triage, you get the status or score, right? 10 is usually a pretty solid, something bad happened, there was some activity. And what that means oftentimes to me is with triage is, okay, I can probably go now and look at the process activity. I can look at network activity. There's something there. There's some IOCs there that might be helpful for my analysis, right? So that's usually what a 10 means. Software, if you play around a little bit with this, say you upload a benign sample, it might get a score of 3 or 4, even though it's completely and totally benign. And there's just different scoring metrics that get added up to come up with this cumulative score. We can pick any of these. Now, what typically the way that I think about this is like the earlier samples. There's a tendency for these earlier samples, the ones that were submitted the earliest. If a lot of things are going to depend on C2 and C2 to be active. And so there's maybe a better chance that with these earlier samples that C2 is still up. Now that it's been out in distribution for say a month, now maybe we've had a chance as defenders to take some of that infrastructure down. And so then it's taken down. So I generally, if I'm going to look at one of these, the first one I'm going to pick is probably the earliest or one of the earliest submissions. I'm also sort of weighing that with, well, what tags are there and what is the status, right? If this first submission wasn't tagged Amadey and it had a score of 6, but the second one said Amadey and had a score of 10, well, I'd probably go with the second one just to start, just to see what's going on. And then ultimately, I might pop all these open in a tab and just do some comparison. Compare the results and see what's different between the 2 or 3 or 4 different submissions. So this one, we'll just go ahead. We'll grab the first one and just check and make sure nobody's got any questions here. Kind of a side note here. I'm using the StreamYard, and if it's got live statistics, I don't see them. And so it's kind of unnerving to know what if nobody's there? Or what if the stream didn't start the way that I thought it would, or something silly like that. So there we go. Just double checking YouTube. Okay. So anyway, so welcome everyone. So now we're looking up, and part of being able to just search a hash is typically we as the researcher, we don't leave a trace. We're not uploading samples. We're not really probably even leaving anything behind to show that we've searched the hash on the platform. Of course, the platform will likely record that history and that activity, but some other external entity, a threat actor, for example, I don't know how they would see that we searched for this particular hash. So this hash, we searched for it, we got results, talked a little bit about those results. Now we can actually look at what's going on here. You might be satisfied with the fact that you've got the tag Amadey, right? And these tags, again, they're going to come from Yara and Suricata and other detection techniques that the Sandbox has employed. They also oftentimes become good tags. So we can click on that. That'll take us back to this search results page, reports page, and now you can see other families, other samples that have been tagged with that. These, of course, are going to be more recent because they're going to be based off of today's date and time. But maybe there'll be some patterns that emerge. Like you came across an Amadey sample and you see all these others. Well, this Amadey has also been tagged with Luma and Redline and Steel C, and there's a bunch of Steel C. And well, maybe they're like, that's a part of the delivery right now, is that Amadey is bringing with it, or it's being brought with many other stealers. And that would be something I'd want to know if this, finding our original sample here was prompting some level of investigation. Okay, up above here, so with triage, the UI is fairly straightforward. I think I've gone through a little bit of this in previous streams. So hopefully I won't be too redundant here, but we've got, an overview tab, we've got a static tab, and then we've got the 2 different analysis tabs. And so overview is a great place to start. That's going to give us the overview. We're going to have general information here under general. As you see here, we have the size of the file. We've got our hashes, different hashes here, MD5, SHA-1, SHA-2, SHA-512, SS-Deep. This one has a malware config. And so for any malware families that have a configuration and that the Sandbox supports, this can be good information because it can tell you or even just help confirm things like the C2 node. Of course, if Triage has a config extractor for Amadey and it's saying it's Amadey, I'm much more confident then that their original tagging and classification coupled with this config extraction is solid. We have this install file, right? So maybe this is going to be, and this is the executable. So we can look for this in the process tree, and that can help to confirm. We have the URL path. So we'll look for this in network traffic. If we don't see it, maybe something during execution prevented it from making an HTTP request. So this could still be valuable IOC that we could use to create a detection, to do some threat hunting, something where if we weren't able to unravel it through our own analysis, or for some reason we didn't see the traffic in the sandbox, maybe because of some anti-analysis or configuration of the sandbox itself, right? This information can be quite helpful. So always good. I always like to look at the malware configs. If it's there, it can tell us a lot. Then we get into the targets, and you'll see, executes a dropped exe, loads a drop DLL. Those are actually all two behaviors that if you go back and look at some of the previous live streams, you will see we have discussed that. But we'll be able to, identify some of this behavior here in the Sandbox results. And then, of course, we have our primary tag, Amadey, which I'm not sure what triage, at least I'm not remembering any way of knowing exactly where this detection came from. If it was from a Yara or if it was from an IDS alert, maybe it's in here somewhere in the UI. Maybe it's part of a paid tier sort of feature. But sometimes it's not going to be 100% clear where this classification came from. Okay, static, right? So sometimes you can do a lot of your basic analysis just in the browser because with the static tab, you'll have basic static analysis. We have some more signatures here. Apparently, this is an unsigned PE file, and we can expand the file because this was the primary thing that we uploaded. I'm not sure why that isn't expanding. There we go. I got to click the hash. And this is just basically parsing, in this case, the PE file. So we'll see information from those PE headers, imports by library, sections and section names, as well as probably some of the entropy. No, maybe not. But just characteristics about the sections. So you can oftentimes through your Sandbox get a little bit of static analysis as well. And then we can move into behavioral. And as you can see with these behavioral tabs, we have Windows 7, Windows 10. So it's common for these Sandbox platforms to launch a virtual machine or two virtual machines. Typically with the free tiers, you're limited to what they want to provide you. If you pay for the Sandbox, then you get a whole bunch more options. You'll get different versions of Windows. You'll get different architectures. Sometimes you'll even get different configurations. You'll probably get Linux systems. Maybe you get Mac. You'll have the ability to upload Android APK files, right? And you can look in their pricing and what they offer in terms of their capabilities. But on the free tier, this is common to be limited to a Windows 7, Windows 10, maybe a Windows 10. Both of these have a score of 10, right? And you will see, if you look at enough samples here in places like Triage, that there can be differences, right? You could see a score of 6 in Windows 7, but a score of 10 in Windows 10. So usually I go with whatever had the highest score, just to try to understand what's happening. And then maybe I look at the Windows 7 and try to compare. Once I know probably all of the behaviors and capabilities that got scored on in the higher ranked dynamic analysis, well, then I can more easily spot what got missed in Windows 7. And that can be vice versa, right? It doesn't always have to be Windows 10 to Windows 7. It could be maybe Windows 7 had a higher score, the Windows 10 didn't. Hard to sometimes say what caused that, right? And I don't usually dwell a lot on it. I'm using these Sandboxes as an easy button, so I'm just going to go with whatever is the most amount of information I can get out of it the quickest. So in this case, we'll just grab Windows 10. A little bit of redundancy here in the general tab, of course. You'll see off to the side, you can resubmit for analysis. You can download the sample. Of course, now if I didn't have the sample, now you can get access to the sample, or if you didn't have access to it, we have the PCAPs. You can grab a PCAP here. We've done that through different live streams. Print the report to PDF if that's helpful for you. We have the malware config again. Okay, here we have our signatures now, a little bit more geared towards the dynamic analysis from this virtual machine. So Amadey has now kind of been, again, one of those redundant tags or signatures that we've seen through the different tabs. But now we have this enumerates physical storage devices, creates scheduled task, and enumerates processes. And as we're opening those, the scheduled task is a pretty good one because it's going to show, when we go look at the process activity, what was the process ID and what was the scheduled task name? Well, SCH task.exe, that's the built-in utility to do scheduled tasks. So very, very commonly used for persistence, or commonly enough. So that's a good indicator, because scheduling a task on the system would indicate a change or a modification to the system, and one that would likely be associated with persistence. So that's a good indicator. Now, beyond the signatures, what we want to look at, or typically what we care about, is processes and network activity. How did it modify the system? And then how did it reach out, if it reached out across the internet or across the internal network? And so you can see our process trees here. It's hierarchical. It's indented to say, okay, this was our original sample. It ran. There's a suspicious behavior. It enumerates processes, right? And to maybe get more information out of that capability that's been identified, you really got to dig. But now we have this utsysc.exe, whatever that name is, right? And if you think back to that malware config, that was the name of the installer, right? So this is starting to line up. Then that turns into schedule tasks, and there's run DLL 32, right? So this looks like that capability, again, that we saw earlier of loading a DLL. So we can start to piece together kind of what's happening here, and in particular now the specifics. We're seeing the path, for example, to this DLL. We've seen this all before with previous live streams, but just so you can see it again, here's the actual command for the scheduled task. So we're going to see, like in particular, what is it trying to create as a persistent task? What is this thing? And in this case, this gives us the full path for that executable. Then it's going to pick up, of course, as it's running those, in this case, those DLLs. It's just going to continue to instrument, continue to record and observe information. And now we can, this is ours to continue to analyze. So we didn't really have to do a lot of heavy lifting here. We didn't have to start Procmon and FakeNet and make sure our VMs were in a clean state. We can just take the sample and search by hash, or if we need to, we can upload that sample, which we'll do in just a little bit here. Okay, next major and one of the final really is our network tab. And you'll see the network tab is going to be pre-filtered and organized to try to bring to the forefront that which is important. So DNS queries, in this case, there's just a post request. We saw that actually in the malware config with the C2 node. It was just a direct IP address, and there's our URL resource path. And so you can click on that, and now you'll get information about both the request and the response here. So we can take a quick peek at the headers, quick peek at the response headers. If we needed to look at the body, which oftentimes we would, just grab that PCAP, download it, open it up with Wireshark. It's typically what I'm doing. There's another post, right? And then some of this other stuff is likely just noise from the operating system, something happening in the operating system. So oftentimes I just mentally filter these requests out, things to bing.com and these ARPA. I don't even know what they are off the top of my head. I probably should. I probably looked it up a dozen times over the last 20 years. I forget. Beyond that, we've got some MITRE attack mapping. The replay monitor, this can be helpful if you want to go back through and look at what happened in the VM. As you'll see, when we upload a sample, you'll be able to interact with the VM if you want. It's going to give you a sort of an interactive session for the duration of that sandbox analysis. But I don't know. I don't oftentimes find that I need to do that. Sometimes you will maybe get presented with a dialogue or something, but it's pretty rare. You think about malware authors, they don't there's a little bit of user interaction typically at the beginning, maybe in the phishing or how they're are attacking the user and trying to gain that foothold. But then once they're there, they want to be autonomous and on autopilot as much as possible. So, but I do watch it. Sometimes, especially stuff I download from open directories, there might, I don't know, the file might get corrupt. Maybe it's missing the .NET framework. That's happened over the years. An older version of .NET or something. That watching the analysis here and being able to spot an error goes, okay, something happened. The sandbox wasn't able to execute the sample as I had hoped. And so like I'm not getting accurate results because there was some sort of an issue. Okay, yeah, thanks, Drew and Fart Simpson. That's a great name. Great. Okay, we got some downloads here. I have a video actually on the channel that goes into using these memory dumps to actually do some unpacking with Redline. So if you look at memory dump unpacking with Redline, you'll be able to check it out. But here, the sandbox is just picking out and dumping memory. And this could be like, for example, if this appears to have, and we'll eventually unpack this thing, but this appears to have some unpacking here. Right? We have our original executable, and then this UT shows up. Well, maybe that unpacked sample shows up here in memory somewhere. And I don't think they oftentimes get classified, but you can look at like process IDs and, you might be able to dump these or just take them all, run some YARL, look for PE files, grep through them, look for PE files. And so, so in that video, I go through exactly one way of doing that and leveraging those memory dumps. All right, so let's go back to the top here. Okay, so that's triage in a nutshell. Again, these are meant to be kind of a basic introduction. There's more to using triage. There's analysis logs. You can dig into the actual APIs that are being called. So you can really start to drill down if you need to. But this is my basic usage, right? I'm just trying to take a sample that I don't know anything about. And before I start doing my basic analysis, what can I figure out about it? Another sandbox, whoa, got a little too clicky there, is AnyRun. And AnyRun has also got a free trial, free tier with licenses that you can pay for that will up your capabilities. If you just go to app.anyrun, you'll be able to get to this public submissions, public reports. It's going to have a very similar look and feel to triage. What version of VM of the operating system did the VM run? Okay, a lot of this stuff is going to be Windows 10. This main tab or like label here, malicious activity, suspicious activity, no threats detected. Right? Again, if the sample has good anti-VM, anti-sandbox, anti-analysis, right, it might hit a sandbox and just not display any malicious behavior. So the sandbox will classify it as no threats detected, because it didn't, right? The anti-analysis was good. Not all sandboxes are created equal in that regard. And so if I have a sample where I don't care if I'm uploading it to multiple public online sandboxes, I might start at AnyRun, get the results. If I'm not happy with the results, I'll try triage. If I'm not happy with the results, I'll try VirusTotal, and I'll just kind of keep working my way through. And if nobody knows anything about it, or they're not able to extract any meaningful behavior, well, then that tells me either I'm reaching a dead end or I have to do more manual investigation. Tags are going to show up here, right, along with typically what was uploaded. So you can see we've got this little Internet Explorer icon says somebody uploaded a URL, and these look like phishing and JavaScript injector. And then this would indicate a file, and the name would indicate that it is a batch file, as well as the file magic here. So depending on what you're looking for, again, if you're just hunting through results here just to see what's going on, if anything's been submitted lately that's interesting that you want to analyze, that's one way to do it. Of course, we want to take a hash that we already have and just search for it. So we can just paste this into hash, usually any hash, MD5, SHA-2, doesn't matter. Whatever the sandbox supports, and these are typically the 3 hashes, then you can just paste those in and it'll find it. And here you can see, very similar to what we saw on triage. We have, in this case, only 2 submissions, but around the same date and time. And this is a pretty good example here of what I was mentioning earlier, that even though let's see, January 3rd, 1939 to 2249. So this looks like the earlier sample on the bottom, which would make sense chronologically, the most recent on top. Better tags. It was able to detect Amadey, and then AnyRun adds this, botnet tag, it's a stealer tag and a loader tag, but this later submission only has stealer and loader. So something in this very first submission provided slightly better insight. And I think in this case, let's just open this analysis up. We'll just click on the result. I think what happens is, if you look at Amadey, right? So here we have a repeat of those tags up in this upper right-hand corner. And then off to the side here, right? Very, very similar to triage. We've got process tree here, and then we'll take a look at network in just a moment. But here with the process tree, it's identified for us, I think, a little bit more concretely what process it was utilized in order to identify, in this case, or apply a tag. So in this case, to apply the Amadey tag right there. So there is UT-SYSC. And that's kind of what we expected from that config extraction that we looked at earlier. And then, of course, all the previous analysis that we did. But I'm kind of trying to pretend like we're not, we haven't looked at this before. You can now select these processes to get a little bit more detail. My screen's going to be a little crowded here just because I'm trying to keep the zoom in. But if we scroll down a bit, let's see here. There's one in particular I wanted to show you. If I can find it. Or maybe I'm forgetting and confusing myself. That could very well be it. Okay, well, more info. There it is. So I clicked on more info. I'll go back just so you can see that again. I think my eyeball wasn't parsing it. Okay, let's close the X. Okay, so we have our process tree. We selected the main process that we're interested in here. And then there's this more info button. Okay, so that's going to just make this a little easier for us to see. And what I wanted to show you here is, all right, so here's where it looks like AnyRun is coming up with the Amadey SIG. Amadey has been detected using Suricata. All right, so I'm not 100% because I don't know how behind the scenes AnyRun or Triage for that matter is putting all this data together. But all right, again, it's usually a combination of these things. So just wanted to point that out. Network still plays a role, I think, in your analysis. But here you can just continue to investigate, dig a little bit deeper into the process activity if you need to try to better understand, what were the arguments. Maybe there's path information that's relevant. Maybe there's additional, as you saw with our primary process here. Maybe there's additional, registry key or startup folder. Maybe there's time-based evasion, right? There might be something in here that is further, better to understand and can help you. So lots of data that's available here, and that's what this process tab is going to do. It's all hierarchical, nested, and it's going to help understanding with what's going on the system. At least oftentimes it will. It's not always going to be like, this is a pretty good example, and obviously probably the reason I chose it, because there's a lot of stuff here that's going on, and it makes sense. Okay, there's probably a layer of packing. Then there's some persistence. Okay, now plugins are starting to get downloaded and being ran as DLLs. We can see based off of that plugin name, maybe what it is. Well, that's probably the credential stealer. There's some PowerShell activity, just maybe some reconnaissance on the system. There's a lot that we can start to gather from it. But not every malware is going to be the same. Sometimes you'll just have one singular process that runs, and it really takes a lot of work to figure out what's going on. Over to the left, now we have our network tab. And this is organized probably, as you would expect. HTTP is still quite prevalent. So we're going to have our HTTP requests. I think they do TLS stripping in here so that you can see the HTTP from a TLS session, but now I can't quite remember. So it's something to keep in mind. We have connections, DNS queries, and then any IDS alerts, right? So maybe the IDS alerts are what I'm going to go to first, just in order to see, just to see what is it telling me. Let's see, I think with AnyRun, I'll scroll down a little bit here. Yeah, like you might get a signature like this down here, Amadey Clipper plugin download request, right? And I don't know enough about that particular signature to say how reliable it is. So you become more and more familiar with how how solid those signatures are. But if I didn't see a clear tag through the rest of the sandbox evaluation, but maybe I saw an IDS alert like that, that could give me a clue that maybe this is in fact Amadey. And then you can select that and you'll get information about the alert. I don't think they're going to share the actual signature rules. Some of these, like AnyRun, you can see that the message itself contains information about the author. AnyRun was the author of these. ET is emerging threats. Likely, though, these are all open, and you'll find those on emerging threats open. So if you really wanted to go figure out what the rule syntax was, what did that detect on, we could go figure it out. Because with AnyRun, right, they do provide pro signatures, and they don't show you those, right, because you have to have a paid account. That's also, I think, a kind of a cool thing, because sometimes when I'm just researching malware based off of PCAP, I'll just run. I don't have the paid rule set. I don't have any paid rule set, so I just use the free ones. I might be interested in making an IDS signature. I haven't made a lot over the years, but I might be interested in doing that. And if I go, like, if I just have my free set and I don't find any detections based off of this pattern, this network traffic that I've identified, I might go to AnyRun and see. It's not going to tell me what the signature was or what it hit on, but if I see a pro hit, well then, okay, there probably is a signature somebody wrote for the thing that I was investigating. So yeah, just another little tip that I use there. Okay, if they have configuration, right, malconf, malware configuration, that's going to be here. You can click it. In this case, it's not, they must not have anything for Amadey. That'll pop up a dialog that has all your malware config. We've got IOC, so that's going to condense the report here to give you IOCs. You can restart your analysis right here. Let's see, we've got download the sample. Down below here is where you can download the PCAP. So if you just want to grab the PCAP, usually the interface is pretty obvious. Now, at this point, I'd say the only thing that I mean, both sandboxes have their pros and cons, but one thing that I will oftentimes go to AnyRun first for is that as I upload a sample and watch the execution, it's going to start to filter, or I'm sorry, it's going to start to populate everything in real time. Something like triage, you get the replay analysis that we saw down here, but during execution, all I can see is the desktop session and I can interact with it. With AnyRun, I can not only see the session, right? It's basically the report page that you're seeing right here. But as it's identifying network activity, as it's identifying process activity, you're seeing that populate in real time. So I can get really impatient, and I like to see that stuff happening in real time, just because it satisfies, I guess, that impatient urge in me, and I can start consuming data from the analysis a little bit quicker. Okay, two more, and I don't know if I would classify these as sandboxes per se. Certainly, VirusTotal has more and more sandbox capability, but that is the venerable VirusTotal. It's been around now for a very long time, and its basic use case is, let's take something such as a hash or URL, let's search for it, and then let's look at the results, right? And so you're going to get a score based off of the number of AV engines that were used to scan it. And here you can have, some results here from these AV engines. And that's just going to give you like a general sense of maliciousness. Now, VirusTotal also has tags up above, as you see here. And while a lot of these other platforms that we're looking at try to give you a very concrete, like malware family, if it understands it, it wants to tell you this is Amadey, where VirusTotal is a little bit harder to interpret. The closest they come right now, at least in the current version of this UI, is right here. You have this popular threat label, right? And this is, I believe, I'm speculating, but I believe it's just parsing through all of these different AV engine classification results and coming up with sort of a common, what is the most common naming convention or parts of the name that's being utilized there. So it's maybe a little bit harder. We do have some family labels here. right? That again may or may not be as helpful for you. But if you put all three of these together, you get a lot of information, a lot of resources. VirusTotal has more tabs, right? We got details tab. That's going to be similar to the details tab that you're going to see in those other platforms. Basic properties, different hashes, for example, the import hash, the SSD, the TLSH. We have different file types. So not only file type from, I'm guessing that's from like libmagic. I don't know. This is, yeah, that's magic, libmagic. So maybe the file type is sort of a aggregated result from the different techniques that they use. TryD, detected easy. Magica is Google's new file magic detection tool, and you'll see that on some of the more recent samples. Some history, right? That can be helpful. When was this first seen? Oftentimes VirusTotal is going to be the first place to see these samples. So this is a good place to look for history, names that have been uploaded, and then we get into PE file information here down below. We have relations tab. And, if I didn't mention this yet, but VirusTotal has also very much a free and a premium tier, and a lot of the data that you can get access to with VirusTotal is going to be behind that paywall. So the enterprise hunt and live hunt and retro hunt and just all of the different ways in which you can take data and samples, as you can see with this relation tab. That's what made me think of it. Well, this is saying, hey, I found through the analysis this IP, and now maybe we can quickly pivot to this IP, this domain. It has pretty good detections actually for a URL. And if we pivot to that, you'll see that it has a crowdsourced context. So this was from source cluster 25. I guess I don't know what that is, but this is saying, hey, this is activity related to Amadey, right? So maybe the original sample didn't provide anything super concrete, but taking some of that relational data, for example, that IP address and that host, was able to help that out, right? So you do have some capabilities here. Absolutely you do. But the real power comes with having that enterprise license. So something to consider there. This is the behavioral part, right? So this is, like historically, VirusTotal has been more just detections and then data hunting. But now there's also a growing capability here with the behavioral, and you'll see that you have different behavioral output types that are going to be grouped down below. So some of it's going to be things through like Kappa and Sandbox execution. Some of it's going to be through crowdsourced rules. Here's our IDS rules. There's Sigma rules. So there's a lot of data that's being presented here that now you can, for example, if I was just interested in Kappa results, maybe I toggle all this noise off and go just to the Kappa results themselves. Hey, Jesse, or Jess, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Yeah, I'm glad Jerry sent you my way. Welcome to the stream. Fort Simpson, yeah, usually just it's usually just one or no processes at all when I try using AnyRun. Yeah, that's very true. Going back to the process activity, sometimes it's a plethora of greatness and you got a lot to digest, and sometimes it's nothing, and you just kind of continue to hit this dead end of not knowing what you're analyzing. Okay, so that's VirusTotal. Community tab's just that. Like, I check it. There's definitely some good stuff here. Sometimes there's just some noise, so you've got to take it for what it's worth, because it is the community tab. But I usually leave no stone unturned, especially if I'm having trouble getting any sort of good insight into the sample I'm analyzing, and I'm really, really trying not to have to get into and start performing that manual analysis. Okay, I would feel super remiss if I didn't mention Abuse.ch. This is just a phenomenal project. There's a number of projects out there that you can utilize. The two most relevant to what we're talking about today, Malware Bazaar and the URL House. Just to show you the Bazaar, it is a place for samples. Right? So you can take, for example, the hash that we have been using throughout these other platforms. You can do a search for it here, and there's the results. So it's saying, yep, this is an executable. Abuse.ch says it is Amadey. There's some additional tags, and then you have information about like who reported it, when it was reported. So now you can select that sample, and you can start jumping around Malware Bazaar data. It integrates with a lot of these third parties that we've been talking about here, such as AnyRun, as you can see at the very top of this vendor threat intelligence list. Triage is down here. Yep, there's Triage. VirusTotal is able to provide coverage scores. Okay, yep, so fair game. And there's some Yara signatures and stuff too, right? So there's just a lot of different ways in which you can look at and collect data. And at this point, right, all we needed was the hash. We didn't have to go and do anything because it's already been submitted. All these platforms have it, and they're providing us with all the different views and resources. So a lot of great options here. Okay, what about doing a little bit of like more organic file identification? All right, so in order to do this, I've got a terminal open here, a bunch of tabs just to try to stay organized. These are on a system that I have internally. This system runs my subcrawl tool, all the traffic routes through a VPN that I've set up. So that way, when I go to the system and I do research, for example, let's take a look at, I found this URL, 89.197.154.116/excel.exe. And at this point in time, it says, hey, neither the URL house or the malware bazaar have this sample. They don't know about it. That's what not found is telling you. That's interesting to me. Now, this is going to recursively scan those open directories. And so if there were other payloads, they typically show up sort of at the same time that the scanning occurred. But I might want to go and actually look at that server. So I will copy the URL, and let's see. This is the actual session I have open. So I'm going to close this. We'll see what happens here. One way to do that is just to use, I use the links browser from time to time. And there's the host. And because this is going through my system that's on its dedicated VLAN through a VPN, I'm comfortable with it. Okay, look, it says that there was an unexpected error, unable to access that document. All right, so this is what I was a little worried about, is that looks like this maybe has been taken offline here. Yeah, sure looks like it. So, I did the scanning a little bit earlier today, and it found the payload, but now it appears to be, that I can't even connect to the server. So maybe I'm getting blocked. Maybe it's offline. I don't know. I could try to fire up another machine or, essentially find another route to that host, but I'm not sure that I really want to have the time to do that at the moment. So let's see. I have this downloaded, and I guess I should have shown you the results before I just jumped into disconnecting from that server. But what had happened was that from the time that I made this original scan, there is just the excel.exe. And then just before the live stream started, there was also journal.exe, right? A new executable, and all of these payloads have been uploaded since they were all timestamped today. So we have two samples here that now I can't connect to the server, but I'd like to find out more about these files. I don't know anything. So I start basic, right? Let's just run file on, we can maybe just look at both of them. This might be enough for today. And you'll see that we have a 32-bit PE file and a 64-bit PE file. Start with the basics. Let's see, I like to look at file size as well. Maybe this wasn't the right way to do it, but there's Excel and there's Journal. They're not the same. They're not the same architecture either. So I wasn't expecting them to be the same. But let's say I find a host. Let's see if this one will connect. This one, I think this one's down to, yeah, these things move so quick sometimes. But maybe I find a host that has 4 or 5 different payloads. This one happened to have one. It was A, B, A.exe, B.exe, and like S.exe, right? So maybe they're all the same. They just have different names or a slightly different config. So I'll download all of those and look at the file size. And if they're the same file size, I'm a little more suspicious that they're closer to the same kind of file. So again, just like, don't forget the basics. That's the only reason I bring that up. In this case, okay, I don't know. They look like they're probably different. They're different architectures, so they're probably different payloads. They serve a different purpose. Maybe they're different malware that sells. All right, so I don't typically do a lot of this on Windows, so bear with me. Oh yeah, okay. So I'm still in. I'm still on my system here. It's a Linux host. I want to copy the files over to my local VM here for analysis. So I've already done that. And I just used SCP, secure copy, in order to copy via SSH from that system to this one. All right, so that's already been done here. You can see there's a number of files. There's that A and B and S I talked about earlier. Here's the file sizes, so that maybe that's a little more helpful view here. But here's Excel and here's Journal. So now I'm back onto Windows, my Flare VM, and I can get the file hash of Excel. There it is. And at this point, all I know is it's a PE file. So let's go online and let's see what happens. So triage, just paste the hash in. Okay, nothing there. That's good and bad, depending on what you want to get out of this. If you don't want to, if you want to try to discover something new, then it's good to see that it's not out there. Okay, AnyRun, no analysis. That's not uncommon to see. My video display to the right. Oh yeah, sure, I sure can. Or no, maybe I can't. I suppose I'm blocking a little bit. Sorry about that. Thank you for letting me know. Let's try. How is this as a layout? Is the screen still visible without me? Yeah, let me know. I'll go with this view for a little bit. Hopefully this is still pretty good. Thanks again for letting me know that I had my video blocking. Okay, so AnyRun doesn't have anything, right? So that's, again, potentially good or bad, depending on how you want to look at it. VirusTotal is always like the test. if it's not on VirusTotal, which it's not still, that tells me something, right? I start to get a little skeptical at this point. Like maybe this is just some legit software somewhere, and it's not worthy of reporting. It didn't flag an EDR somewhere to get automatically uploaded or something. Or maybe it just hasn't been used for distribution yet. And the fact that the server has been changing payloads a lot, even just this morning, would make me kind of lean towards the latter there. We can go to the malware bazaar as well, although typically if it's not on VirusTotal, and usually I start at VirusTotal. If it's not on VirusTotal, it's probably not going to be anywhere else. But let's just go ahead and take a look. SHA-256. Yeah, sure, it's not there. Okay, so that's cool. Now we can upload it. And I'm going to go ahead. We'll upload one of these with triage. So you do have to create an account. You do have to get logged in. We'll go to submit. And let's see, we'll use Excel. Now, you are going to upload this. So now we're losing control a little bit of whatever this contains. So again, be cognizant of your OPSEC. If this was something you find in your organization, maybe it has something proprietary to your organization that you don't want out there for the rest of the world. So you do need to be very careful. I found this scraping an open directory. So I'm not too worried about making this publicly available. In fact, usually for me, the ultimate goal is to upload all of these to the malware bazaar so the rest of the world knows about them. I downloaded it as a plain executable, so there's no password, there's no optional password, right? If you want to be a little bit safer in handling these, you'll put them in password protected archives so that you can upload them as password protected archives and just give triage the password. Okay, now we're submitting it. And oh yeah, okay, so this is actually pretty cool here because what happened, so maybe this is red team stuff. I don't know. And I say that because it flagged it immediately as Metasploit, right? So it could be that a red team got picked up. Maybe the security team doesn't realize that they're there and they're researching and uploading, and right, and now we're just on to a red team. And again, I say that because Metasploit, red team tool, plenty of adversaries, threat actors, cybercrime, use these tools too. So yeah, can't say 100%, but it is something that crosses my mind as I'm trying to weigh exactly how serious do I take this threat. I'm not defending an organization under attack, right? If this showed up in my environment, I would treat it as bad and I would continue to press and block and research. But I'm just a researcher finding things, right? So we uploaded the sample though, and this is also really important because we got a solid detection right here, static, and we didn't even have to submit the analysis, right? So that means that with the Sandbox, while I don't know how they identified Metasploit, likely it came through a Yara, and not only that, but now we have this malware config, and in this case, we know what it is and where it's talking to. So if we go back to let's go back to this tab here. I just want to look at 89, 197, 154, 116. 89, yeah. So it's the same host. I was just curious if it was the same host, but there it is. So there's the configuration, right? So this alone, just by simply uploading the file, not even submitting it for analysis, gave us some really, really good results. And you might, I guess I don't know off the top of my head, if you don't submit, if it even shows up as a record, as a report, right? So now we could go ahead, we could submit. Or maybe it's because, oh, it's resubmit. So maybe it already identified this. That could be it, right? The sample's already been uploaded and it's just pulling from some of the previous analysis. I could be misunderstanding a little bit of what I'm getting here. But I do see with this, at this stage, even files that have never been here, no, it can't because it wasn't there. Because it's not, the file's not been there. Right? We searched for the hash earlier. It wasn't there. So now we're uploading it. And now we have the ability to submit. So we could go ahead and hit, I guess, resubmit. Maybe I'm a little confused on the terminology, but this would give us the actual sandbox run. Okay, I know I'm getting a little long here. So this is just so you can see it. Here's the console we have into the desktop. It's going to run another typically, limitation with the free tiers is you will only get a certain amount of execution. With the ones where you pay, oftentimes you can say, oh, I want it to run for a custom amount of time. Now, do you have time to let something run for a half hour? Maybe, maybe not. It's really up to you and your research. But oftentimes these free tiers are going to be limited, and it's going to be just enough time to let this initial flurry of activity unravel and hopefully get some information or insight here. So we might not get any more or any better information from the dynamic analysis at this point than what we got from static. So, but there we go. We can just let it run. We can come back to it in a moment. If we want to use AnyRun, very similar, we just go to new analysis. But before we do that, let's go to our terminal and we'll get the file hash of our journal, because that's the other one that I haven't looked at yet. So we'll just see if it's already on AnyRun. No task found. Okay. Probably not going to be on VirusTotal then. Yep, no facts found there. It's probably not going to be on triage. So let's close this tab and we'll just go ahead. We'll submit a new analysis. We'll drag and drop journal.exe into the window here. This is where if you had a paid account, you'd have all your customizations. And this is not just simply the Windows. This can be what software is installed. This can be the network as well. Do you want this to connect out to the internet? Do you want it to be behind a VPN? Do you want it to be network simulation through something like iNetSim? So there's a lot of different options usually at this level here. I forgot to silence things, so 1 second. Okay. Oh, now I clicked away. So we'll just do that again. Almost to the end of the stream here. Let's see. All right, run public analysis. Okay. All right. Now they're telling you here, all of this data will be available in the public reports. Right. So that's just you saying, okay, yep, I acknowledge. Let's go ahead and upload this. And yeah, here we go. Right. So you're seeing information start to populate here in real time. Looks like we have some DNS requests and some connections. Microsoft.com, Google.com, that's not as interesting. Maybe these connections are, and the different ports and or processes. So you're going to be able to look at the connection between the actual process and the network connection itself. This looks like Cobalt Strike. Right. So there's a tag right away. And there's that tag. So again, kind of starting to feel more and more red teamy, but this could certainly be a threat actor too. But now we have Cobalt Strike, likely they have a good configuration extractor. And we were able to take 2 executables that we didn't really know anything about, see that they weren't on any sort of public, information source, and very quickly go into identifying some key IOCs, and maybe at this point, even the most important, identifying what they are. We had a Metasploit, reverse TCP shell, and now we have a Cobalt strike beacon. So two things that are used for backdoor access or for persistent access. So that can be, of course, really, really helpful here. We could sift through the connections tab as well as the DNS requests and just see what other information we can get out of this that could be helpful. Maybe it's just operating system noise. It could sometimes be just sort of false data that the malware is throwing at you, making simple requests to different legitimate resources just to generate additional noise. Let's see. So yeah, Fart Simpson. Yeah, I think, okay. So question here. I think I almost missed this. Would you recommend starting with an online sandbox or setting up an environment like Flare to build a solid foundation in the field, or just use both? Yeah, I would use, I would really use both, because that's part of what, why I've started the series the way I have, and doing both, using both the basic tools and the online sandboxes. I'd almost say at this point, maybe to go with the online sandboxes. So that way you have a better understanding of what's going on with malware and how to start to identify key information before just jumping into the basic tools. The basic tools, I think sometimes that's a bit of a misnomer, because while they are basic, they still require a high level of understanding to figure out how to use them. If you go back and look at the video on Procmon, there are some strategies that we talk about there to help take all of this data that Procmon captures from the system and filter it down to things that are interesting. But if you don't know anything about the operating system, you've never looked at all of how Procmon captures data and what data it captures, it can still be very overwhelming. Whereas, maybe looking at a sandbox could help you to better understand that, kind of upfront. Keep in mind, though, that these sandboxes right now, we've got one process here, right? We kind of talked about that. Sometimes we get one process, sometimes we get multiple. But it filtered all of this other noise from the sandbox itself. I mean, likely it collected everything that the operating system was doing, all of the legitimate process activity and network activity, and then it's filtering it down. And so it's kind of a jump when you go from a sandbox like this that refines and pre-filters to just like collecting raw. Start with benign samples too. You'll see that there are a number of samples that go along with the Malware Mondays, as well as in GitHubs, and of course any place you can find stuff. But if you start with benign samples where you can kind of look at the source to see what it's doing, and then do the basic analysis to see what you're capturing and how to capture it and how to filter for it, I think that'll help as well. So it just takes a little bit, right? Just be prepared to be persistent. I think you'll do great. Okay. All right. So, those turned out to be two pretty good samples. We could continue this process. I'm a little curious, for example, on a.exe. So I'm just going to run file on that. Okay. It's another 32-bit executable. Let's get the hash and just see if anything pops up on VirusTotal. So let's start there first. Oh yeah. Okay. This looks like some more Cobalt strike, right? So this one I might not take any further, because that's maybe all I needed to know about that sample. I wasn't able to show you the host, but A, B, and S all were on the same host. So I might now at this point go ahead and just get a hash of b.exe, and let's see if that's on VirusTotal. That looked like the same hash. Let me try that again. Yeah, that sure was. Didn't have a good copy paste. Okay, Trojan Cobalt Strike Whisperer. I don't know what Whisperer is, but it looks like we got more Cobalt Strike, right? And so where VirusTotal maybe doesn't have a good config extraction, I'm guessing our friends at Triage or AnyRun, they're going to have that config extraction. They'll be able to help you, pull some more of those layers back without having to do the work yourself. If they didn't have config extraction, or if you couldn't use these online resources, then you would have to likely continue to do the analysis to see where is it connecting, how is it connecting. Maybe at some point you decide to build your own config extraction, which Cobalt Strike's pretty well documented at this point. Just to circle back on the last thing, here we have our excel.exe. So now we have kind of full 10s across the board. So this was a perfect performance by excel.exe. A little bit better tagging now that this executable has ran. And of course, we have all of the behavioral data that we were missing before. So we have GET requests and DNS requests, if there were any. Doesn't look like there was anything in particular. And I'm just at this point eyeballing. Do I see anything related to the C2 node? Well, this looks like it's all HTTP traffic. So maybe we switch over to the TCP. And yeah, looks like it did try to do something right there, right? There's a connection to that extracted C2, probably just binary data. So I'm going to, if I'm curious at this point, I'm going to drop that PCAP out of here and look at it and probably Wireshark. So there we have all of our analysis. Okay, went a little long today, but covered a lot of platforms. Again, basic usage. If you can afford to search publicly or provide samples publicly, then these are great platforms. Likely your organization, if you work for someone who is a security researcher, you're going to have access to private sandbox, whether it's something like a triage or an AnyRun or your own internal configuration or system. Use these tools to help you. The goal here is you have something unknown or something you're not real sure of, and this could be the quickest way to go from uncertainty to higher confidence as to what that artifact actually is. So that's the goal here. Let's see. Welcome, Kishore, fellow malware analyst. Great. Excited that you're here as well. I think you're catching the tail end of the stream, so you'll have to get the recording here because I'm about to wrap up. I don't see any other questions. If anyone has any questions, let me know. Happy to stick around for a few minutes and answer those. Of course, if you'd rather post it in the comments are going to be open. They'll be open for every video and every stream. If you catch the recording here, have some questions, please feel free to drop those in comments as well. And one of the membership things I'm trying to do to help myself stay focused and motivated is to use priority reply to comments. So maybe that's a perk there if that was something that you'd want to consider. But that's all I have for this stream. So if there are no other questions, thanks everyone for joining. Reminder, next couple live streams are going to be more of a guest driven. So really excited and looking forward to starting that format. And likely I'll get the next Malware Monday scheduled, and we'll probably do that here in early September. So as we start to move into the fall. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.